So right, it's
well,
the end of the year.
Yeah,
I know, it's the end of the year.
well, we've been doing this all summer, and like, oh yeah, who's gonna do what? And what do we need to say? And
Well,
anyway,
always next year, Kathy.
yeah, we'll be the same. I think we'll be the same now. I think this is our new style.
It's
We're
tradition
The
now.
wing it.
It is tradition.
Yeah, it's tradition. Right? Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Vicki Lineback, and I want to welcome you to our meeting. We meet every the third Tuesday of every month from 10:30 to 12:30, and this last year has been mainly on Zoom. We also have a Facebook page if you'd like to join. It's called Orcas Island Genealogy Group, and the Orcas Library has generously gifted us the privilege of using the ancestry for free until the end of the year. I think that's all. And I usually send out a reminder if you're on the email on the week before the meeting, and then a day or two before the meeting again as a reminder. So I thought first maybe we should just go around and introduce everybody, right? So I'll call your name. Hey, I'm going to call Kathy. How about that? You can introduce yourself, Kathy, and tell us what's coming up. Oops, you're on mute, girl.
Off mute now.
Okay.
Okay, Kathy Saskowski, one of the co-coordinators of this group, which I think we've almost been going for 3 years now. I don't know.
Yep.
But I think that's the deal. So, and we have things planned. So I can't see her. Is Gloria on?
She is,
today?
but she's on mute.
She's on.
That's okay. So I'll have her talk in a second, but Gloria Epping is going to be our next speaker next month. She's a member of the group. I can't wait to hear her explanation of her talk. I have not heard anybody do a talk like what she's planning to present. So yippee. And then Sandy Strelu, who is the architectural preservationist from the town of Freddie Harbor, has agreed to do a presentation on her work, preservation work, and then we'll see where that goes. I don't know quite all the details of that, but that will be coming up too. So those are two things we have in the hopper. Once again, if you as a group member have something you'd like to present, like Gloria is willing to do this, we don't know exactly where to go from here since we don't pay speakers. I think a lot of other groups maybe do. Lisa probably knows better than I do about that, but so we have been fortunate to find wonderful presenters. Okay, so.
All right. Okay, I'm going to call you so you can say hello and wave. Leith?
Hi, I'm here. I'm Leith Templin. I live on Orcas, and I just am so grateful for this group. A lot of time I haven't been able to dig in, but I always learn something every time, and keep making notes so that when I can use them, I hope I can find my notes. Do you think that the library will extend the ancestry thing for January? Or could they?
I don't know, and I don't know if Holly's listening or not, but we can certainly ask Phil if that will be available in 2021.
January, February might be nice.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not up to the library, it's up to Ancestry. So I will keep you guys, or Mary will keep you guys informed.
Oh, okay.
Because I know that's a huge bonus to be able to do it at home and not have to sit outside in the rain.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, Marianne Wilson, you're muted.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back, and I'm excited for this meeting, although I do have to leave an hour early. I'm sorry about that. This has really gotten me going again. I had done a lot of work on genealogy 20 years ago when you went to a genealogy library and poured through microfiche. And then because of technology, I lost all of that stuff and I'm starting up again. So I've been inspired and helped a lot by this group. So thanks. Good to be here.
Good. Boyd Pratt, you're on mute too. There.
Hi, everybody. I come in two ways. One is I had until the end of the year the Adult Programs Associate job at the San Juan Island Library, and we tried to do a lot of history and genealogy there. And in fact, Robin Jacobson and I did a kind of several genealogy things that are recorded on our website if you're interested. I'm also a civilian and I do research, and I'm currently working on a book on the history of fishing in the islands, which is similar to my island farming book. But I also did a study in the midst of a study for the Park Service on the Mitchell Bay Band, and it's gotten me really deep into cross-cultural marriages and families throughout the islands, and a real close look at the Roeblen report and all those documents. And I would love to give a program on that if you guys are up for it. But it really, it connects all the islands. So.
Good. Thank you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Boyd. And I'm glad that you're attending our meeting. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Gloria, you're on mute there.
Yes, hi, how are you guys? Yeah, I'm here in Dallas for the winter time. It's not so great here though. I thought it would be better weather, but anyway, I'm planning to do a presentation next month about artificial intelligence and its impacts on genealogy. And I'm doing a lot of research and trying to bring forth some tools that are available. It kind of started, Kathy asked me to do a presentation about the Civil War sleuth product that has been integrated into the National Archives for identifying Civil War era photographs. And I started, pulling the string a little bit, and it became a much bigger topic. Kathy and I both seen a really interesting program about the three-dimensional holographic interviews that they have been doing with Holocaust survivors and capturing. They've asked those survivors like 2,000 questions so that people can do interviews with them in the future, 100 years from now or whenever. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And that technology was used by the Steven Spielberg Foundation at USC. They're starting to make that available to other non-Holocaust survivors. So it's a really interesting way of capturing historical information. Actually, it looks like you're sitting next to the person, asking them questions, and basically having a dialogue with someone who's not even living anymore. So it is pretty incredible. And that's one other aspect of the AI that I've identified. And then there's some controversial topics as well. You probably heard about that in some of the other presentations we've seen. But anyway, I'm trying to pull all this together for next month. So that's a little teaser.
Wow. That sounds so cool. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, happy Hanukkah, everyone. I am very happy for you to allow me to be a member of this group. Every week I find something new out, and I find it all very interesting.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here. Ramona.
Hello. I don't know what the question was, but I'm happy to be here too. And what I'm looking forward too, is I think I'm going to have my work done by the first of the year, so I can jump back into the genealogy of my family. I'm really looking forward to it. So
That's great.
I appreciate all of you and what you do, being able to put this information together for all of us.
Thank you. Hey, Robin. You're on mute, girl.
There we go. Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. We celebrate Hanukkah too at our house.
Happy Hanukkah. Good morning, Carol Dickey. You're on mute as well. Maybe she's away. She's out collecting her heirlooms for you to look at. Good morning, Margot.
Oh, hi. I'll be visible for a minute. Yes. Again, I'm not sure what we're doing, but just saying hello, probably. Some of you know that for some reason, I got interested recently in trying to pull together a health family tree. And I think, Vicki, you helped me, and what's her name at the museum and so forth. Since no one in our family has any kind of base to work from in terms of a pre-formed tree, we haven't worked at that at all, and I'd love to, but don't seem to have time to get it going. Tacking a health history, let's call it, on and how to do it. And the format has been difficult, so I'm still working on that. And I think it'll probably just solve itself now by just being line items, in a document. And I don't know how to organize it other than that. So anyway, hi.
Hi. Well, if anybody's got any tips on that, let's hear from you. Maybe you could email me if somebody has any ideas that we can share with Margot. Good morning, Bob and Gail. And you're on mute. Hey.
Yeah, somebody came over and I didn't want to have it blaring while they were talking.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And now our presenter, Lisa Oberg. We're so happy to have you back. Lisa did a fabulous presentation this summer on the pandemic of 1918 in Seattle. I learned a lot I'm just amazed at how similar everything is. Only the dates have changed.
Pretty much.
And today I'm really excited that you're doing this on preserving documents and heirlooms and things like that, because I know I have something to show that I would love a little feedback on it. Plus, I just want to show it off because it's such a cool piece that I have from my family. But thank you. And Lisa, you do you're the librarian at the UW Special Collections, but it's your focus is science and medicine. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but I dabble in many more other things.
I know you do. So from there, I'll just let you.
Okay, sounds great. So I'm Lisa. I did change my name here in the Zoom window, so you can grab my email address at any time if you're interested. Feel free to email me if you like, especially as we talk about some of the different preservation tips and things I'm going to talk about. If you come across something later and want a suggestion, feel free. I just put 2 handouts in the chat as PDFs. I'm going to send them to Vicky later. I meant to send them this morning, but I was dilly-dallying around. So there you go. But the first one is just a reading list of some things that I've pulled together, some websites and so on. The second is a wonderful guide from Gaylord, which is an important archival vendor that we use significantly in special collections. And so pretty much everything that I'm going to say is said better and more authoritatively in the Gaylord guide. But so you'll have that as a resource. Gaylord does do a lot of custom boxes and storage. So if you have a really precious object, we'll talk about this later, you can measure it and say what your specifications are, and Gaylord will build you a box. It's not necessarily the cheapest thing on the planet, but it is a great way to be able to preserve your artifacts for future generations. So with that, if Holly is there listening, the screen sharing is disabled.
Okay, I have to, sorry. Woo, it's me. I have to make you a co-host. So one moment, please. Where are you on my list? Lisa. Okay, make co-host. Yes. All right. That should.
Yep,
work.
we got it. We're there.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Turning myself off now.
All right. So the topic of today is preserving family heirlooms. In a different time, in a different place, I also call this the Genealogy Roadshow. So pack up your van and all your heirlooms, and we'll talk about them. I want to just share with you a couple of artifacts, things that you might have in your family collections. This is my great-grandmother. This is her autograph book that she received when she was about 8 years old. And this is a page from that autograph book. And it's typical kind of greeting that you might find. Dear sister, when you are old and cannot see, put on your specs and think of me, your loving sister, Amy. So you might have something like this. This is velvet. It's made with acidic paper. So there's a lot of different things going on with this. This is a ledger that I purchased at an antique store for a teacher's ledger. It's in great shape, but the binding's falling apart. And so, you know, this is the kind of thing you might have, a book that's unstable because it's coming unsewn. This is a wonderful thing I helped do some research on. This is a signature quilt. And so you might have a quilt in your family collection that if it's in plastic, we're going to talk about that later. Plastic is the enemy of all your artifacts. This is something else that's in my family. This is a crucifix that was brought over from Luxembourg in the 19th century. It's made of ebonized wood and silver and who knows what else. So those are just to kind of spark your memories about some things that you might have around your house. I just want to start off though with a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a antique specialist by any means. So I just share with you the different techniques that we use in special collections, but we do have a team of experts in the libraries when we do have paper that needs to be restored or things like that. So just do keep in mind that there are experts out there, and sometimes that is the best answer, is to get a professional opinion. But I am a librarian and a curator. I work primarily with books, photographs, and paper. However, I began my archival career working at the Archdiocese of Seattle on their vestment collection. And if you've ever seen liturgical vestments, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of different types of fabric. There's a lot of very heavy embroidery. So that's where I got my start. I would not qualify myself as an expert on all types of artifacts and And I'm certainly not an appraiser of monetary value. So just so you know that. You were talking a little bit earlier about library programs. One that we had last year at my local library, King County Library, was to have a certified appraiser come and talk, because as the baby boomer generation is getting older, they have a lot of collections that their kids maybe aren't interested in. They're interested in one or two, but not the whole volume of the collection. And so this woman, she came and gave a presentation. She was great. But the most significant advice that I want to pass on to you that I took away from that presentation is, if you are interested in getting an appraisal, you do want to inquire whether that person is also a dealer. You want them to be representing your best interests, not theirs. And so if they are also a dealer, they may be lowballing you because they see resale opportunities. So just that is something to inquire about. And it may or may not affect your decision to use that particular appraiser, but just something to consider. So I want to talk about, though, there's a variety of different kinds of what we call in the library world interventions with an object. The first is preservation. The preservation is basically you're going to maintain the current state of an artifact by putting it in a stable storage environment to reduce further damage. So this is basically hands off, but what you're doing is trying to neutralize any factors that are potentially causing further damage. Conservation, however, is a little bit different, and this is where you basically try and stabilize a document or a book or something like that so that it can be either more safely stored or gently used. But typically when you do something like this with a conservation method is meant to be reversible, so that let's say we do a lot of what we call tip-ins in the library, which is where a page has been ripped out of a book and they use a special kind of Japanese rice paper to reaffix that page. But with a little bit of water, that page can always be removed again. So it's a reversible treatment. Lastly, restoration, which a lot of people think is preservation, but restoration is really the permanent change of an artifact. Can think about rebinding a book entirely, or taking something out of its original frame and doing something else with it. So this is a reversible action on some kind of an item or artifact. Not a bad thing. I'm not making a judgment call here, but just there are different gradations of treatment that you can apply to a family heirloom. So if you do nothing else during these rainy doldrum days at the end of the year, and this is on that handout as well, I encourage you to create an inventory. Look in those drawers, look in those nooks and crannies. If you're like me, I have family photographs in probably 4 or 5 or 12 different locations. And so, why do I have them all in those different locations? Because of size. And so maybe I can consolidate those so that I don't have quite as many different locations. Mostly, you want to assess their current storage conditions. I know they're so popular, it's so tempting, but attics and garages and basements are the worst place to store your family artifacts. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then just to think about whether or not there are ways you can more safely store those. So all of these I've talked about so far, zero cost. There's nothing involved. It's just raising your own awareness about your family artifacts. We'll talk about some things you can do that require some expenses a little bit later. So as I mentioned, some of the enemies of your artifacts, aside from attics and garages and basements, heat, especially variable heat. So that's why attics are bad, because it's cold in the summer, or it's cold in the winter, hot in the summer. So that heat is fluctuating all of the time. Also direct sunlight for pretty much any kind of family heirloom that you might have, whether it's painted china, paper, whatever, direct sunlight is going to cause that item to fade. And then also varying humidity is also a real significant factor, especially in basements and garages. So this is an example of what's happened with a book that was in a garage for an extended period of time. You can see that it's blooming with mold here. I will tell you that in our library, if we get a donation of books that are covered in mold, they go right into the garbage. Mold is infectious, so you can't bring a moldy book into a library. It will bloom and spread because of spores. So there are things that you can do to arrest the mold. So if you do have a precious book that has gotten moldy and damp over the years, there are things that you can do to help repair it. Okay, also insects, especially if they are again in those garages, they can be subject to some kind of insect infiltration. And then a real enemy of our artifacts is acidity. If you can see here, if you see the little postcard on the left of the children bobbing for apples, if you look at the facing page, you'll see kind of a dark mustard colored shadow here. This is the acidity of this postcard burning the opposing page. And so if you have a scrapbook like this, just a very simple thing you can do is to buy some acid-free tissue paper on, maybe you don't want to take a scrapbook apart, but you can buy some acid-free tissue paper on Amazon, and you're going to just interleaf it. You're going to put a piece of tissue paper between the pages, and then at least that postcard isn't touching the photographs on the opposite side of the page when that album is closed. I have a scrapbook that my grandfather kept all through his teens and 20s and college days. I don't want to take it apart because it's an artifact to me in and of itself. It has his goofball captions and all kinds of other things. But so this is what I've done is I put tissue paper in between the pages. So this is an example of a book that was produced with pulp paper, basically, in the early part of the 20th century. And so you can see it's what's called shattering in library lingo, all around the edges. Every time you touch it, those pages just disintegrate more and more and more. Books like this are pretty much past the point of no return. You can, when this process is speeded by high heat and changing temperatures, high humidity, so that this will speed up this process. There is a process where you can dip each one of these pages in an acid neutralizing solution and reassemble the book. As you can imagine, that's quite expensive. But if it was a precious family Bible or something like that, there is a way to stabilize that, but you can't reattach those shards once it starts shattering like that. Now, curiously, paper that was produced in the 19th century, the 17th century, high cotton count in the paper itself, not going to do this. This is your more recent publications that are made out of this acidic paper. So if at all possible, you want to store your artifacts in a stable environment. So a little bit of temperature fluctuation and low light. I don't know how many of you maybe have some vintage Christmas ornaments. My mom has some, and every year when we open up the box, one or two of them has spontaneously broken over the year, just being stored in the box because of a history of changing temperatures that they've been exposed to. So let's turn our attention now and talk about some more specific types of formats. So photos. The worst part about photos, especially from the 19th century, those cabinet cards and things like that, is that they are permanently mounted on cardboard. So it's better not to stack those up in a box, photo to photo. Again, just like I talked about with the interleafing with tissue paper, if you can put each one of those photos in a Mylar, which is a brand name of an inert kind of cellophane, if you will. so that the photos don't touch each other, then that's going to help reduce the damage. Of course, your fingers are the worst source of damage to photos, and as much as possible, you want to either handle a photo by the edges or wear gloves. Interestingly enough, lots of people come into special collections and they've seen, scenes on TV, and they assume that the first thing we're going to do is make them put on some white cotton gloves. Actually, most of the time, they just make you more clumsy and inept than anything else. So we only ask you to wear gloves when you're handling photographs. That's the only thing. So you should try and adopt that practice as much as possible at home too, because your fingerprints will leave a residue, and over time that will become even more pronounced. As much as possible, you want to store those flat so that they're not getting bent and things like that. And as I've shown here, in those Mylar sleeves, if at all possible. Again, you can purchase those from Amazon. You just want to make sure you read the fine print that they're actually acid-free. You can get a set of all kinds of different sizes. You can also buy it in rolls if you're a crafty type and want to just buy a big roll and cut it and fold it to shape. You can do that as well. So the Stuff of Nightmares is those very, very, very popular albums from the 70s, the so-called magnetic albums. These are a disaster. If you have those, I would encourage you to consider that to be your New Year's resolution, to get those photos out of those albums. If nothing else, take off that plastic sleeve that surrounds the photos and just buy some acid-free tissue paper so that the photos are not getting that off-gassing from that plastic. If you are feeling more inspired, I would encourage you can use Glide dental floss and get underneath one of the corners, and then you can just kind of slide the photo off. Or there's something called a dental spatula, which is just a very thin spatula you can get on Amazon for about $5. And you get under the corner of a photo and you just sort of tease your way and are able to slowly work that photo off. Now, keep in mind, it's going to have a lot of that residue from the photo backing on there. So you want to get that on a piece of acid-free paper or something, but you don't want to then stick a pile of these photos together, because that residue now is going to be touching the front of the other photo. Also, I know it's really popular. A lot of people like to laminate things. Don't laminate your photos. You will never, ever, ever be able to get them out again. Consider what we call in special collections encapsulation, which is basically where you take some Mylar and you just make basically a clear envelope for it. You can actually even just sew it, the Mylar, on your sewing machine and just make a little pocket for it. And then if you ever need to take that photo out for any reason, you just trim off the Mylar edge and then you can remove the photo from the capsule. So that's what we do with large maps, with all kinds of different things. We encapsulate them rather than permanently laminate them. If you have Polaroids, generally the most stable form of a photograph is the photograph itself. And so you will never hear anybody in a special collections world advocating for you to throw away your original photographs. No, you can scan them to your heart's content. You should still keep the originals. The exception is Polaroids. Scan those Polaroids and ditch them. If you remember the Polaroid process, it's an entirely chemical process, and this is what happens. The colors shift over time, but not only that, those chemicals off gas. So as they break down, they start to create gas. I had a box of Polaroids that I got from my grandmother. And when I opened up the box after having been closed for a year, I mean, just the gaseous wave that came over me, they will deteriorate. So Polaroids, you absolutely I give you 100% permission. Scan those and just get rid of them. Again, those magnetic albums, this is that dental spatula that I was talking about, just helps you to kind of work those photos off. Very, very, very low heat with your hair dryer, not to the front of the photos, but can also just help loosen up that adhesive if you're having a hard time getting off the photos off those pages. You also are probably going to have lots and lots of paper and ephemera in your family collections. As much as possible, you want to store those flat. It really helps if you can just have one item in an acid-free manila folder, one item per folder, because each one of them is going to be made with a different paper making process. Most of the paper, as I said, from the 20th century assume it is acidic. And so again, things as much as possible not touching each other is just a very low-tech intervention. Use that acid-free tissue paper to interleaf. And paper conservators can easily repair torn pages. And as I mentioned, they can deacidify some pieces if it's really something very, very precious that you want to make sure is going to last another 100 years. I mentioned a bit earlier scrapbooks. Typically the paper that scrapbooks are made from is highly acidic. If it's like my grandfather's scrapbook, I don't know what kind of industrial strength glue he used to put those pictures on those pages. They're not coming off ever. And so what I've done is I've scanned each of the pages so that I have that record of how he constructed the album. And where possible, I've taken the photos off the pages, but some of them are never coming off. And so they're just going to deteriorate more over time. There, as I mentioned in the beginning, from the archival supply companies, you may have a scrapbook that's an odd size. You can get one made to a custom-made box exactly to the size of your scrapbook, or you can also buy just an off-the-shelf box and then pad it with a little bit of rumpled up tissue paper and so on. But the thing is, you want to minimize any shifting around and moving in the box. And this is what I was talking about earlier with that interleafing of a piece of tissue paper in between the pages. These are the kind of, oh, bless you. These are the kinds of document storage boxes that you can find from archival supply companies. You can also get manila acid-free folders. Like, all of that stuff is available on Amazon, but you can also get it from Daniel Smith and other places in Seattle. Art supply stores are going to carry stuff like this. The most important thing is you don't want to overpack them. So you don't want it to be just so dense that you can't even, slip a piece of paper in there easily. They need to have a little bit of room. I mean, one of the things that happens with humidity is that paper will expand and contract. And so you need to give it enough room that it can do that without damaging the spine, because the weakest part is the spine of a book or anything like that. And so that's what will break. The pages won't, the spine of the book will. So here's some examples of some books. As you can see here, this family Bible, the spine has fallen off because that hinge there, right here, this is the weakest part of the book right here. And especially if it's expanding and contracting, this is cardboard underneath the leather or whatever. And leather expands and contracts in humidity. And so it starts creating tension on this hinge right here. And that's why you always get these loose threads right here. These are some of the boxes that you can get ready-made from the different archival supply companies. This type of box right here is called a clamshell. These are ready-made for Bibles. They actually sell Bible boxes, as they're called, in a variety of different sizes and depths. So you can get those. If you have a book that does have a warped cover, you do not want to stack more books on it to try and flatten it back down, because you will break the hinge. what we do in things like that is we buy a box that's as deep as the warp, and then fill in the gap with tissue paper so that you are not resting the box on that warped edge. Again, because that will cause the spine to break. If you have wood shelves, just keep in mind that there's just also a chemical process that comes off of wood, and that is one of the reasons why we put things in boxes. Even though I will just say, and I should have led off with this, you know, these are your family artifacts and you do want to enjoy them. So I'm not advocating that you put them away in spun glass so that you don't get to enjoy them. That's not the point. But there are some things that you can do to kind of minimize the environmental impacts. This little thing here, this little flap design here, this is made out of acid-free cardboard. This is what we call a phase wrapper. So if you have a pamphlet or a little piece of newspaper paper clipping or something like that that you want to keep safe, you can buy phase wrappers from the archival supply companies. But what it does is it just folds up and makes a little envelope. And then you can see here these little Velcro buttons then that just hold it closed. And so this is what we do with a lot of smaller objects that we have in special collections. And then you can put, 5 or 10 of these in a document box, and then they're all safe and sound. Duct tape, never a good idea. If you have something that has been attempted, cellophane tape from the 50s and 60s that has yellowed over time, fortunately, eventually cellophane tape will just lose all of its adhesive and flip off. But if you have something that's very precious that's been held together with duct tape or worse, there are ways that you can restore that, but there is going to be a little bit of an expense with that. We do have a list of paper conservators that in special collections, if anybody has really special objects that they would like to restore, and I can certainly share that list with you. Also, just all these kinds of over-the-shelf things, repair things that people would have bought to try and repair things at home, mostly not acid-free. So you're probably going to see, you'll know if somebody's tried to repair something and it's yellowed, that pretty much is an indicator that it's acidic. So textiles, we are going to have some little things at home. One of my most prized possessions is my grandmother's baby shoes. And so as much as possible, you do want to store those out of the light in an acid-free box. We do buffer those things, each layer of a quilt with tissue paper, just because especially like crazy quilts are made with a variety of different types of fabric. Each one of them is going to disintegrate at its own rate. Silk is very notoriously fragile, so it's going to break down at a different rate than velvet, for example. But again, quilts are meant to be enjoyed, and so if you want to display them at home, the biggest thing you should do is to every time you check your smoke detector or something like that, put it on a rotation for yourself, that you take it off the quilt rack and you refold it so that those folds and creases do not become permanent over time. So you want to take it off and turn it around and let each face get kind of some front time so that it's getting equal wear. There are some different cleaning methods. If you were to take it to get cleaned, I would really inquire of a dry cleaner or something like that, what their experience is with historic fabrics, so that there's many a sad tale of someone who took a precious thing to a dry cleaner and either shrunk or disintegrated. So just do inquire, whether they've worked with that kind of material before. Again, those insects and the humidity and the varying temperatures are all going to cause things like that to break down. And often with quilts, what breaks down first is the thread holding the whole thing together. It's not the fabric. So you just want to again, try and keep it in as neutral state as possible. Now, if you were in a high-end museum like the Victoria and Albert, each dress has its own drawer. And you can see that, you may be able to see that it's stuffed with layers and layers of acid-free tissue paper to kind of keep its form so that it's not developing creases over time. And we don't all have this kind of storage available to us. And so we have to find some other methods. But the most important thing is to just not put it into a box and forget about it. You need to take it out, as I said, refold it, make sure that you've got some good padding in there so that it just isn't getting too weighted down and creating permanent creases, because those creases is where you're going to start to see the fabric fail. You may also have porcelain and china and pottery and things like that. You may already know that you can find professionals who can repair chips and broken handles. As much as possible, try not to wash them with water, especially if they've got gold or silver leaf on them. Don't pack them in newspaper. I know this is like so popular, but newspaper, newsprint in particular now, that print really comes off and it will become a permanent part of your object. So do try, and if it is something important, do invest in just some blank acid-free paper to pack it in. And again, avoid direct sunlight as much as possible for any of your artifacts. Silver and jewelry, you may have things like that, metal pieces. The most important part of any kind of artifact that's got metal in it is that most of these things are what we call mixed media. So it's metal and it's cloth, or it's all kinds of different things. And so again, each of those is going to have a different sort of stability associated with it. And so again, those environmental conditions are going to help keep the entire piece intact. If you have a really precious object, similar to what I know that Vicky's going to show later, this kind of box here, this is the surround here that this is in is called Ethafoam. Etha, E-T-H-A, foam, F-O-A-M. What this, you can buy this in a big block, and what we do with this in special collections, if we have a precious object that's 3D and has kind of moving parts or is very fragile, is you can buy this and you just scoop it out and make a mold that fits your object. And then you have a layer of Ethafoam that you put on top. And so this prevents it from floating around in a box and things like that. Not all of your objects you're going to feel the need to do this for. You have something that's an odd size or again has like moving parts attached to it, you might want to consider something like that, especially if you want to move it. It's going to just help stabilize it. I already mentioned Gaylord, and that's the handout is from Gaylord. Hollinger Metal Edge is another important purveyor of this kinds of stuff. Both of these will make custom boxes to whatever specifications you have. They're acid-free. They have all kinds of acid-free supplies, tissue paper, mylar, as I said. There's all kinds of different things out there on the market. We live in an earthquake zone, and so I think one of the things you have to consider for your artifacts on display is how stable are they if there was an earthquake. And so a lot of folks, we use museum putty in special collections. It can leave a little bit of a residue on a shelf, but if it means that your thing doesn't jump off the shelf, that may be a risk that you're willing to take. If you have paper like a newspaper, maybe you saved the front page of the Seattle Times when Armstrong walked on the moon or anything like that, and you're concerned about the acidity of it, you can buy a pH testing pin from Amazon for, again, about $5 or $7, and just test a discrete corner of it, and it will show you how acidic it is. Again, with paper, especially with newspapers, there's not a lot you can do, but to reverse the process, except keep it out of direct sunlight and try and keep it in as stable of temperature as possible. But if it's a baptismal certificate or a marriage certificate, it may, and you can see that it's highly acidic, that may be the kind of document where you want to take it to a professional and have them try and deacidify it for you. So the next kind of couple of steps that I would like to encourage you is to try and these take a little bit more time, but to document the story behind each of those artifacts. How did it come to you? Who had it before you? Where did they get it? I think a lot of us have those stories in our head, and we think that the people around us were listening when we were talking about it, but the facts are going to get jumbled over time. So write those things down. And if you can, leave it with the object itself. And then include your family artifacts in your disaster plan. If you have to evacuate because of a house fire or an earthquake or whatever, are there a handful of precious objects that you would be distraught if they went up in a house fire? And if they're easily accessible and well packaged that you can grab them quickly, you might want to include. My mother lives in a high fire area, and so last summer she was on the verge of having to evacuate several times, and so stacked in the garage right next to her car was two small boxes of the most precious photos that they were ready for her to put in the car just in case she had to evacuate. That and the cats. So priorities. But anyway, include those in your plan. I have a pair of wax hands that were on the wedding cake of my great grandparents that fit together kind of like this. And so, those would be, I would be so distraught if they ended up as just a lump of molten wax. And as much as possible, earmark your wishes for where you want those artifacts to go. If you have a granddaughter or a sibling who specifically wants a particular item, make your wishes known so that your family is not going to be fighting over that item later. It's a gift. My grandmother called it the put your name on it program, where she had a Post-it note on most of the things who it was to go to after she died. There is so much reading that you can do about this. And so in the handout, I listed just a number of different books that you can get. And perhaps you can reach out to your public library if there's some of these titles that you would like to see for your library collection. But there's some of them are generalists, so it's going to be talk about all kinds of different artifacts that you might have. And then some of them are format specific, like photographs or textiles or other kinds of artifacts. So just check out the list, and there may be more reading you can do about it. So with that, I now just want to open it up to people who maybe have an artifact that they would like to share. And I am happy to make some suggestions about what I think you should be doing about storage. They're only suggestions. Keep in mind, I'm not a licensed appraiser or anything like that, but I can at least hopefully give you some ideas about how to neutralize the environment a little bit. And I was just one comment, Gloria, that the mansard roof behind you there, I think you should tell people you're in Paris. That's where I thought you were.
Yeah, it's just a Parisian style apartment building behind me.
Yeah. Well, I think you should work it.
I always kind of think of the same thing.
So I know Vicki has something that she wants to share.
I'm gonna get it right now. It's in a horrible box. I don't even want to show how I have it stored. It's so bad.
So actually, this came from Barb and Dick. I don't know if you can, I gotta see where my picture is so I can see whether I can see this. Not. Okay, so here's the bottom of it. And it is a smoking pipe. It was my great-great-grandfather's. I'd really like to scoop some DNA out of it if I could. But it's got like a bone. Let's see, where am I here? It's got like a bone mouthpiece, and it's got these funny little cloth things. And then this is a cherry wood twig, and then a porcelain bottom.
Wow. From what country, Vicki?
Germany. So I would love it if I could. I'd always thought maybe I should get an old clock, a box, but it's quite tall. It's got to be over 36 inches high. And you had mentioned this EFTA or ETFA.
Ethafoam, yeah.
Maybe that's what I should be putting this in. I mean, I'd love to display it, but part of it is thread.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because I remember, so just insider knowledge here.
Yes.
Dick is Vicky's cousin and Barb is my aunt. So that Barb and Dick are married to each other. That's Vicky and my connection. So, but this was hanging in their home for decades.
Well, yeah, and I know the story now. It made me think about, yes, I should document how this came to be, because it was his father that got it from his father, who probably got it from his father, right? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know. Maybe that foam is the way to go for storing it.
It would certainly keep it from, wiggling around in a box, but you could certainly get a box and just pad it with lots of extra acid-free tissue paper, just to keep it from having much movement. This is what I would call, these are kind of the bane of the existence of archivists, is the mixed media piece. So it's wood, it's porcelain, it's got metal fixings on it, it's got all kinds of things going on.
Yes.
And ideally, you would have different environmental conditions for each one of those. But of course, this would absolutely lose its historical and artifactual value if we took it apart. So that's why we want to try and store it as neutrally as possible.
Yeah. It has this lovely painting.
Does it have any kind of maker's mark or anything on it?
A maker mark? No.
Uh-huh.
No. He was like, this is probably, well, he was born in 1841. So I'd probably say it was probably the 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
That nature. Yeah, there's no markings on it at all. I mean, as far as where it was made. It does have some gold luster, which is a little interesting on it. And then this is all cloth too in here.
Oh, is it kind of flexible?
Yes. Yeah. I am serious. I wonder if I could get DNA out of the...
You probably could.
I don't know who would do stuff like that, but it wouldn't be spit. It would be dry spit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Leaf, it's a smoking pipe.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think they were like, put it on the ground almost to smoke with it because it's so long. So that's my show and tell.
Can I ask a question about quilt preservation?
Absolutely, yes.
So my family came from Hawaii, and we have several Hawaiian quilts. As you probably know, Hawaii is just death on artifacts. And so often we take the quilts and we stick them in the deep freeze just to make sure to kill off all the bugs and stuff like that. Is that okay? And then we store them with interlaced tissue, acid-free tissue, in a wooden chest. And so I guess my other question was, what about, just lost the name, camphor and things like that in terms of keeping away bugs?
Yeah, those are great questions. As much as possible, and when I say this, understand that I know that these things are not all possible. So again, no judgment here. If it's possible not to store it in wood, it's probably better. Fabric does need to have some kind of breathing to it. Another alternative, so I would put it in an acid-free box if at all possible, but and then even the acid-free box could go back into a cedar chest or something like that. That would be fine. You can also, if you have a vacuum with a variable speed, so you can like tone down the suction on it, you can cover the end of your nozzle with like a nylon or something like that and very gently vacuum it to take up any dust or debris that might have accumulated over time. And then another option with textiles is to just buy unbleached muslin. And then you could just buy a big piece of it and then use that instead of tissue paper as an interleafing. And that's just another way to keep those layers from touching each other. Do you have the Hawaiian quilts are spectacular. Do you have a picture of one or anything?
I'm sorry, they're in a different building right now, but I'd love to share some. Yeah, and I will say that another artifact we got from the family were these camphor wood campaign chests that was used by the British Civil Service in Southeast Asia, and they're amazing. I mean, we keep our normal clothes in those, and they smell like camphor. When you take out a shirt or t-shirt, it smells like camphor. And these have to be, I want to say, at least 100 years old, if not earlier. So, yeah.
I would read maybe some in the Gaylord Guide, just what their recommendations are about camphor. I know that some places use natural products like wood chips and things like that. But I'm not 100% sure about those anti-bug things, anti-moth things, especially for wools and things like that.
Thank you.
It's a great question. And I love Hawaiian quilts. They're spectacular. Anybody else have anything they want to ask about or share?
I do. My uncle gave this scarf to me. He received it from Johnny Versace, and he had framed it. And unfortunately, there's like a tape all around the edge that makes it's silk scarf, and it's like a Asian design to it, but it's got a little bit of fraying, and all the corners or all the edges are like hardened by the adhesive that he used in the frame. I'm just wondering what's the best way. I mean, I don't think I can get that off because it's very delicate and silk, but to prevent any further damage, should I just wrap this in a acid-free tissue paper and put it in a box, an acid-free box? Okay.
Yeah, and because silk is fairly fragile, I would just make a note to go in every year or so and just refold it in a different way.
Okay. And there are a few, it looks like, I don't know, just marks that I guess had come off or discoloration on it, but I should just not try to do anything with the cleaning, right? Like you can kind of see there's a little bit, I don't know if you can see that, but a little bit of black mark.
I think that's where if you are ever at an antique show or something like that, and they have a textile expert, to ask them if they would recommend cleaning for that.
Okay.
When in doubt, I will say, just in general, do nothing.
You're better off the way it is rather than taking a chance. Okay.
It's a great story.
Yeah, I know. I guess he was so excited to have it. He put it in his frame. He sent me a picture of it in the frame, but then he decided it was time to take it out. But anyway, yeah, it is pretty cool.
So do you know how he came to be in the vicinity of Versace?
He worked for B. Altman in New York. He did all the windows you know, the
Oh, wow.
and everything.
That's my dream job.
Yeah, I actually did the volcano at Mirage too in Las Vegas. But anyway, so I guess they had, you know, when they had special events and things like that, he got to meet him, and I guess he received a scarf from him. So that was kind of cool.
That's
It was
awesome.
obviously, but yeah. Well, thank you.
Lisa, I
Yeah,
have
thank
a
you.
question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned taking care of some of the 3D artifacts, wiping it down with a microfiber cloth. Is there anything more environmentally friendly than the microfiber? There's a whole new awareness that microfiber is causing microplastics into the environment. And so I'm wondering whether there's something more eco-friendly.
That is a great question. And I will say I do not have a good answer for you because we do use microfiber in special collections. We are trying to source more environmentally friendly options, but of course we haven't been at work for now 9 months. And so we haven't been thinking about it, but we had been trying to find some other alternatives. You know, back in the before times, we used flannel and other kinds of things. The only problem with that is that they do leave lint and other kinds of things. And so if it's something fragile, that lint may incorporate. So if as much as possible you want to use something, the reason why microfiber is popular is because it doesn't leave any, the fabric doesn't leave lint particles and so on. So something with a low lint count. If that I made that up. I don't know if that lint count is how you qualify fabric, but
I wanted to ask a question. On one of those photos you saw the back of a plate that your grandma maybe had labeled. What did she use to label it with?
I just found that picture on the internet, but
Oh, okay.
that was one of, I would not advocate for that particular label. That was one of those old-fashioned mailing labels from like the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, that's what I
you
thought.
Licked, you know, that you licked and they just stuck it on the back.
So what would you do now if you were trying to label things for great nieces and nephews and stuff?
What we typically do in special collections, again, but these are not for things that are necessarily on display. So this isn't the most aesthetically pleasing option. But we get acid-free tags and tie a piece of string with the tag on it.
Sure. Thank you.
And Lisa, I have a question and a couple of comments. Thank you for your last comment saying the best thing to do is if you don't have to, don't do anything. My storage and my heirlooms and artifacts are mainly in my photographs. I've taken photographs and don't have them all with me, but they are, as you were saying, they are in all over the place, like your mother's. And I just wanted to ask about a few of the preservation tactics, which I haven't done. I have most of the 4x6s prints, color, and well, black and white I did myself and printed myself, and they are 2 1/4. But I have them stored, I hope you can see this, in a box, shoe boxes from Land's End and so forth. And I just went up and grabbed a couple of the packets because I've never done anything other than store them in their original, you know, paper packet. And in this one, I'll do all of my demonstrating here. And in this one, I pulled out how I have kept all of the 2 1/4 negatives that I took. And this is a negative from the late, well, I'd say 1960. That's what it has on the label. And it's in the original plastic sleeve that they gave it to me in. And to me, it looks in perfect shape. I've had it enclosed. It hasn't been open to the light, so it hasn't faded. But my question is, and then here is another, when I took photos, I used to do a, whatever you call it. What do you call it?
The contact sheet.
Contact, thank you. So here's a contact print that I made when I was developing them and printing them, and it still looks totally good, not faded. So my questions are, what about the plastic material that a lot of them are kept in, and the paper packets and Land's End or LL Bean storage boxes?
Okay. First of all, I just resent the handouts because we had a couple of people come in later. So just so if you want to know what we were talking about. The Land's End boxes, I would say, have to go. You can get a acid-free box, the same size and dimensions with the same clamshell top, which will be a much better storage. I would get rid of those paper wrappers that the photos are stored in, because those are going to be highly acidic paper. The glassine envelopes that the negatives are in should be just fine as is. Contact, yeah, because those are like the same material that stamps come in and stamps collectors use, and that's acid-free. So those should be okay.
Even from way back.
Yeah.
In the 60s and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. As much as possible, though, if you can, I would, have each of those photos in their own individual envelope, especially if they're the most precious ones to you, so that they're not touching another photo.
Yeah.
One of our student jobs is our students just take a stack of photos that have been donated, and they just sit there and stuff one photo into a Mylar envelope. And that's their whole job.
That's not going to happen here. I don't think I have ever yet thrown out any of my originals. So it's time to do it. Because they are, I'm old enough that they're my heirlooms. The only other thing is I have letters from my father and mother, and a few typewritten stories and so forth, and that's the other thing. But this is the main thing. What about slides?
Slides is another one of those. They're not quite as bad as Polaroids, but that is one where there is a lot of color shifting that happens. And so if you can scan the slide and get a digital print of it, then I would recommend that before the color deteriorates too much. If they're in a neutral temperature environment, they should be just fine. But again, it's the cardboard that they're in that's acidic. So that would be something where I would advocate getting those slides scanned.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you brought up a good thing, and that was letters. And I'm going to piggyback off that for a second, because a lot of people do have family letters. As much as possible, if you can take the letters out of the envelope and very gently flatten the letters, because again, the weakest part is going to be on the hinge of that fold. and let those relax, and then put the letters themselves in an acid-free folder and the envelope in a different folder, because the envelopes are typically made of lower quality paper that's more acidic. So if you can separate the letter from the envelope, that's a good first step. And again, if you can buffer the two with either acid-free tissue paper or a folder, that's going to help, because like I said, the envelopes are more destructive than the paper the letters were written on.
Wow. So Lisa, I have this folder here. I'll show you the folder, just big old thing like this. And in this folder are some original Darius Kinsey photos of my family's logging operations. So I've taken them to the Watka Museum. They have a big collection of Darius Kinsey stuff, and they took copies. But now I just have this folder with, let's see, they're big.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see. It's too bright. But anyway, just the big old tree and the loggers and all that. And of course, this just is sitting in my closet, which seems like it should be somehow better taken care of. I don't know.
Well, it looks like the photos are in Mylar. Is that right? Oh, I see.
Well, I got this from my uncle who actually, yeah. So there's just, these
it's like
pages.
A portfolio.
There's cardboard.
Kind of, yeah.
On cardboard. Yes, a portfolio. They're on cardboard. And you can pull them out.
Got it. Okay.
So I think this must be an old thing, but.
Yeah, I would just guess, just by looking at it, that that cardboard is probably acidic, and the plastic is probably not acid-free Mylar. So I would maybe take those out of that portfolio and put them in either Mylar or acid-free tissue paper between them.
Okay. So Lisa, I have two questions. One is, I have this oil. It is a painting. It was a self-portrait from my great aunt. And, you can see the old paper on it. And I have it hanging on my wall, not in direct light. But I want her on the wall. I don't want her in a box. So what do I need to do to help her or keep her?
So there's a couple things you can do. One is, as you do nothing and just keep her out of the light. That's the easiest and lowest intervention. The other thing you could do is take her to an archival framer, and they will deconstruct the frame. What they'll do is they'll make sure that the image itself is not touching the glass. So they'll put in
There's
a little.
no glass.
Oh, there's no glass. Okay.
It's oil. It's an oil painting.
I couldn't quite tell from that.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So then you don't need to worry about the glass then.
Yeah.
So you probably don't need to do anything with her. Just continue to keep her out of the light. That was about all you can do.
Okay. So I have another question. I'm not so sure how preservation this question is, so maybe it's not appropriate for me to ask this, but I don't know if you guys can see this. This is Charlie Chick, and he is an original vaudeville doll from entertained in Seattle in the 30s. The people that owned him were good friends of my grandparents, and when they came and visited in the house in East Sound, when my grandparents had the store, Charlie always came. and he used to sit in the rocking chair downstairs. And when they retired him from Seattle and their work, they gave him to my mother and her 3 sisters. And for my whole life, he was in a box all apart because his rubber bands or whatever came apart. So he was in a box for 50 years at least. And my son married a gal whose mother was probably one of the best well-known doll fixers in New York City. She put him back together and dressed him, but she didn't say he was worth much. She was used to $70,000 China dolls from Europe. So she wasn't all that impressed with him, but Charlie has always been a story in our family. And I would like some help in trying to see if anybody has it. I mean, he just sits in a rocking chair now. But I would love some help in trying to find out some history of the vaudeville dolls in Seattle, because apparently he was quite popular on the stage. And I don't know, he just sits in a rocking chair now. He's not in the sun and it's kind of temperate. He's inside. So I don't know. I think he's okay.
Is Charlie Chick your name for him, or was that the name he came with?
That was his stage name.
His stage name. So I think what I would do is start with some newspapers first and see if you can find any references to these dolls, maybe where they were sold, or it's possible too that if you were to take some photos of him and send him to MOHI, the Museum of History and Industry in Seattle, they might either have another one or have some history behind that. That's a first. I've never seen those before. I would just make sure he's out of the sun for starters.
Okay. Well, bye.
He's cute.
He's big. I mean, you can see he's as big as an 18-month-old baby.
He is, yeah.
He's quite large. So, okay, thank you.
That's a great story, though.
Yes.
Lisa, I have something
Yes,
to show
hi.
and a question about it. Hi.
Okay.
I really enjoyed your presentation.
Oh, good.
Thank you
Thanks.
so
I'm
much.
glad you were here.
Thank you. I have my father's armband from the French underground in World War II. He was in the US Army and landed on the beaches of Normandy, survived, and then spent the rest of the war in Paris. So he was in Paris on the day that it was liberated. And he stored it improperly. So there's a big crease in it. Of course, I'm terrified to iron the thing. So I was thinking, tell me what you think about this. I could put it on my dining room table underneath a whole bunch of heavy books and leave it there to get that fold out. What do you think?
What is it made out of? Can you tell?
It's linen. It's a very coarse weave.
I would start off maybe a little gentler and maybe just put it in between a couple of layers of tissue paper, and then put maybe a sweater on top and just let it naturally kind of relax over time.
Okay.
A lot of weight is going to potentially cause those threads to break down quickly, but maybe if you do it slowly, they'll kind of relax. I second your idea not to iron it.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I've got a plan. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's a wonderful, wonderful artifact. And have you captured the story behind it so that the two stay together?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
I don't know the
great.
whole story because it was really, really difficult, if not impossible, on any given day to get my dad to talk about his war experience in general, but he did tell me about the armband, not the whole story, part of it. He told me about some other things. So when he died, my two brothers and I inherited his World War II memorabilia. My brothers think it's theirs. They will never own this stuff. I will keep it for the family, but it's going to stay in my part of the family. So
good for you.
Yeah.
And have you been to Normandy?
Yes. In fact, I walked with my father and my mother, and we retraced my dad's exact steps up from Utah Beach. I was amazed that he remembered everything. He remembered the boulder that he rested on and hid behind while he was being shot at. He remembered the family who hid him in their home from the Nazis, and it all came flooding back. But that was one day that I got him to talk about it, and then he kind of shut down. But that was, I would say that was the highlight of not only his life, but mine, to be able to walk the beaches of Normandy with him and retrace his experience on that one day.
Oh, it sounds like a once in a lifetime experience.
It was pretty great.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, well, I will just remind you, I'm going to just put in my chat here my email address again, so you can capture it if you'd like to. I will just say again, I'm not an expert on everything. I think I know everything, but I don't. But I do have a team of experts, and so that I can consult. So if you do have a question about something, feel free to email me, and I will see if I can get some thoughts to you. And I'm glad to have had the chance to come back again. And I've never been to Orcas Island, so maybe someday when we're all freed from the confines of our coops, that I will make that trip.
Good.
I got a place for you to stay.
Great.
Yes, I think this was it's really fun to see people show and tell and the stories and that. I've really enjoyed that. And I've definitely gleaned a lot from your presentation, Lisa. I have some terrible habits I need to break.
Oh, everybody does, Vicki. Even archivists have their own dirty secrets.
We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much fun.
So how are we able to find the handouts? What do I need to do to get the handouts?
I'm going to email them to Vicki, and then she will send them to everybody.
Great,
But,
thank you.
Do you have a little window, a little box at the bottom of your screen that says chat?
Yes.
Okay, if you click on that little icon, that little conversation bubble, a little panel should pop up on the right.
Yes.
Okay, and then if you scroll back up, there should be 2 PDFs, and you just click on each one and it'll download to your desktop.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you think, Vicki? Should we call it a day?
I think so.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Well,
Thank you
happy
so
holidays,
much.
everyone.
So what's
My-
happening next month? Do you guys know yet?
Yeah, Gloria is going to talk about artificial.
Gloria
That's right. Oh,
will
that's
be
right. That's
giving
right.
this presentation.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
that's
3%
to,
left on my
um,
computer and my charger's downstairs, so I'll have to just quickly, but yeah, I'll be doing a presentation about AI and its impact on genealogy.
Right.
Artificial
I forgot.
intelligence.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All right.
Happy
Okay.
holidays, everyone.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Thank you. Yeah, same to you. Yeah.
And thank you,
Bye.
Holly, for hosting us.
Yeah.
And Mary.
And Mary.
Although we're back to Mary now, right? Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.